All right. Good morning, everybody. It is 9:04. We are a little bit tardy this morning. We apologize due to weather, but it is a wet day. So let's have a meeting on the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, Tuesday, February 21st meeting. I'm calling that to order. This time, could I get Janet Oren, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. How are you? Chief, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Bob Lucy, Chair.
Here.
Marsha Burke-Bidler,
Here.
Vice Chair. Katie Jung.
Present.
Von Hartung.
Here.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Charles Moore, Fire Chief. David Wattsville, Deputy District Attorney.
Here.
Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Chief.
Item number 3 is public comment. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment for item 3.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we'll close public comment. Chief, Commissioners and Fire announcements.
I have one announcement, Mr. Chairman. At 11:30 last night, the Truckee Meadows Fire, North Lake Tahoe Fire Protection District, in conjunction with NDOT and Washoe County Sheriff, responded to a report of an avalanche on the Mount Rose with a vehicle buried. Fortunately, the outcome was good. The vehicle was trapped, but just at the tail end of the avalanche, and so Washoe County Search and Rescue and Washoe County Sheriff were the first to get to the vehicle and got the people out. Search and Rescue went through the rest of the debris field and found that there were no other vehicles trapped. So certainly some good news this morning to report.
Great. All right. Any commissioners have any announcements at this time? Commissioner Burke-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I just have a question about something that's on the consent agenda, and I just am curious if you could bring us back the number at our next meeting of how many of our EMTs, how many of our firefighters are actually EMT trained and certified by the department.
Sure.
Thank you.
Chief, and then one thing I'd like to add as well for a future agenda item is a proclamation. Very rarely does this board do proclamations, but I think it would be suited that this board does a proclamation for Chief Green. We had his service last year, and I'd like to do in memory of Chief Green a proclamation for him, if we could do that.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll close item 4. And Chief.
Item number 5 are consent items. I understand, Mr. Chairman, that in item C, you've been given a new agreement at the last minute for you to look at. So there were just some minor changes from what was in the board packet, I understand. So that's going to be handed out right now.
Do we want to pull item C? Does any of the commissioners want to pull item C out of consent at this time?
I think we should probably ask
Take a chance to look
the
at this.
DA. We haven't had a chance to read these, Mr. District Attorney. Is it substantive in nature?
I don't believe they're substantive. And if legal counsel wants to weigh in on that, he could summarize the changes.
All right, so in the recitals, you'll see a description that there's a collective bargaining agreement that's in effect, and there was a dispute concerning an interpretation of some language. In order to resolve that dispute, the parties sat down, worked it out. There are some changes
Mr.
that
DA,
will involve some increases.
Before we do that, let's just pull it out and
Okay.
just out of consent. We'll just pull it out of consent and have a discussion because it seems like there's more to be discussed there than to. So let's pull C, item C, out of consent, and then we'll take a vote on the other items currently this morning. So we'll take with C being removed.
Move approval of the rest of the consent agenda without C.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed. Now let's move on to item 5C, consent. Mr. DA, I apologize. Mr. Watsfield.
So as I was saying, there's a collective bargaining agreement in place, and there was a dispute over the meaning of a term and a process that was in place. In sum, the district felt that there was a practice in place that provided meaning to the term. The firefighters disagreed with that. The parties, either through a grievance resolution process, came to a conclusion, and what you see in front of you is the result of that. The gist of it is that there's an internal certification process that takes place at the district that occurs pursuant to the authority of the district's medical director. And in order to make sure that employees are going to be subject not just to state certification, but also to the district's internal certification process before they're entitled to receive pay, this was an agreement that the parties negotiated.
Commissioner Hartung.
So is it, and I'm still a little unclear because I'm still scanning, Mr. Watsfield, is it 6% of base or is it 3% of base?
So none of this is technically an increase. It still conforms to the language of the contract. The firefighters were asserting that they had a group of employees who were entitled to 6%. The district had argued that in fact they were only entitled to 3% because of this certification issue.
Okay.
And this is a little complicated when you haven't seen it. But in order to resolve the grievance and resolve the ambiguity, the parties, again, they met, and then they decided that the internal certification process would be required for the 6%, and in addition, there would be an additional process created to assist firefighters who would not pass the internal certification in doing so. If they don't make that, if they don't pass it the next offered, I'm just going to call it a sort of a remedial program. If they don't pass that, then they'll no longer be entitled to the increase, and they'll return to only receiving 3% instead of 6%. There is also a retroactivity provision in this that dates back to the date of the grievance. So firefighters who were not certified going back to, I believe, October of 2015 would be entitled to that pay.
Okay, so it's, if I may, Mr. Chair, so it's only 6%, it's not 6% on top of the 3%?
That's correct.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe it's applicable to only about 5 employees.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the
Motion
MOU?
Motion to approve.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Can we get a
Commissioner
pest control operator
Yeah.
to kill the crickets up here?
All right. Seeing that, all right, that one passes unanimously. All right, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 6 is the IAFF Local 3895 report.
Commissioners, good morning. John Sieben, Local 3895. I have 3 updates for you guys this month. The Truckee Meadows Firefighter Association and Foundation raised almost $3,000 for the victims of the Little Valley Fire by hosting a pancake breakfast in Washoe Valley. We'd like to say thanks to the South Valley Volunteers, the Truckee Meadows Community College Paramedic and Firefighter Academy, and current and retired Truckee Meadows firefighters for participation on that.
That's great.
That's a lot of flapjacks.
Okay, the second up is planning for our 5th annual Guns N' Hoses firefighter golf tournament is underway. Our goal this year is to raise around $100,000 for the total of the 5 years. This has been a successful event, and all the money raised goes to Northern Nevada Children's Cancer Foundation, and money stays here locally. The third topic I have is 11 members just returned from Firehouse World in San Diego, which is a fire conference. So these members went down on their own time to get the latest techniques and training to bring back to our department. So thanks to those guys. That's it.
Thank you. All right, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, item number 7 is discussion and direction to staff regarding 2017 Nevada legislative session and other legislative issues proposed by legislators or by other entities permitted by the Nevada State Legislature to submit bill draft requests or such legislative issues as may be deemed by the chair or the board to be of critical significance to Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to include but not limited to, supporting Senate Bill 60, SB 60, which revises provisions of governing Medicaid payments for ground emergency medical transportation, and Senate Bill 67, SB 67, which revises certain provision related to fire safety requirements and authorize the fire chief to testify if deemed necessary. Item number, SB 60 really relates to those fire departments who transport patients to a hospital. As you know, REMSA is the franchisee for the county, but nevertheless, we have transported 3 patients on a mutual aid request on behalf of REMSA. It would be a rare occurrence where we would actually transport a Medicaid patient, but what this bill would allow us to do is to factor in our other costs over and above what Medicare's nominal charge back to a fire department, or payment back to a fire department would be. So we can factor in things like repairs to the ambulance, like a little bit of overhead, and some other things to capture our true cost. So it's not going to make a substantial difference to our billing because, again, it's a rare time when we do transport. But nevertheless, I think it is important for those fire departments in the state that do transport patients to have that ability to charge more than what Medicare's base amount is. SB 67 really is an issue that pertains to Southern Nevada. It has to do with sprinklers, fire sprinklers, and we really don't have a direct interest in that bill, but nevertheless, being an advocate for fire sprinklers, I think it would be good to support it if we're asked. And then I became aware of just recently SB 128, which the clerk will hand out, and it has to do with county fire department, county fire districts funding on behalf of the boards. Madam Clerk, has that been handed out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. So from what I can tell, and our lobbyist is looking at this, but from what I understand, it has not gone to committee, nor has there been any testimony on it. But it essentially allows for a board of county commissioners for it to be optional to fund a county fire department, rather than mandatory, and that's really what it comes down to. I don't know what county may be interested in having that option, but nevertheless, that's really what it comes down to. So my recommendation would be to allow your fire chief to testify on Senate Bill 60, 67, and we're monitoring Senate Bill 128 for any impacts to the district.
Commissioner Burke-Bigler, I have a question for you, being that you are a legislative liaison for the Washoe County Board of Commissioners.
Yes, sir.
We're fairly early in the session right now. These bills have not, I don't believe, have made it to, have they been heard by committee yet? Do you know? Chief, do you know if they've been heard by committee yet?
I don't believe they've been heard by committee at this time.
No, they have not, to my knowledge.
So if we were to take a position now, would it be a little early, or can we postpone this till the next meeting to kind of see where we go with these bills before we take a firm position on these
Certainly.
bills?
Yeah, certainly.
So
What would be your opinion?
why would we want to do that if we're supportive of these 2 bills as they currently
Just a question to you.
sit? I don't see any reason not to go ahead and support them right now.
Okay.
The way the rules are set at the legislature right now, they can actually pull these up for hearing without noticing anybody. So I think we should just go on record as supporting them. And then, we're supporting them in the form that they're in. If they make significant changes, we'll need them to come back to this board.
Okay.
So I think the motion needs to say that we will support these in the form that they're currently presented to us.
Okay.
And I would make that motion.
Would you be, okay. I have a motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Commissioner Jung. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed. Motion carries unanimously.
I have another question.
Oh, yeah, for further discussion, so Commissioner Hartung. Oh,
No,
sorry.
just another bill.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, public comment.
There's no public comment on this item.
Thank you, sorry.
Chief, are we following AB 32, which has to do with, being able to use minimal pesticides without having a license? Remember, we discussed that.
Yes, we did discuss that,
And I just don't see
Mr.
it.
Chair.
And it really, it's not going to affect the county, it'll affect the fire service directly. So, you know, if you guys get ants in the kitchen at, you know, Station 17, and you want to spray some Raid, it will be against the law.
I have not been following it, Commissioner, but certainly can get ahead of that.
We'll have to, what it'll mean is we'll have to have somebody who is a licensed pest control operator either in our fold, or we'll have to hire someone.
I know our practice has been when we've had rodents or some sort of infestation of insects, we've called for an exterminator. We don't do that ourselves.
Just even simple things.
Yeah. And I think they're actually on a maintenance contract to periodically
Okay.
spray and trap.
How about if we decide that at some point that we want to spray turnouts for repellent of bed bugs?
Well, that would be applicable, certainly.
And you know, the equipment with something like Bedlam or Crossfire, which are over the counter, by the way.
It's interesting, waver off topic a little bit, but I did see a thread in the International Association of Fire Chiefs blog where a lot of fire departments are concerned about bed bugs, and certainly we've talked to you at length about that, and it's sooner or later, it's something we may have to deal with. So,
And I'm not talking about an infestation in the firehouse, which would require a professional to come in and deal with that. I'm talking about preventative measures.
I think at this time, Commissioner Hartung, we could ask the chief to follow it, AB 32.
Yeah.
I know County Commission is also following it, so we'll just keep an eye on it and see where it
I'd
goes.
put that on our watch
Okay.
list.
All right. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll close item 7. Chief, item 8.
Item 8 is the fire chief's report. Wanted to mention we're getting caught up on a couple of months of career and volunteer statistics. If there's any particular call that you see that you want more information on, I can certainly address that, but otherwise I'll leave the report as it stands. Let me talk a little bit about a conversation that I had with Dean Dow at REMSA. We occasionally have lunch, and during the course of lunch, Dean Dow mentioned that he's looking for more fixed-based places to operate an ambulance from outside of the Reno downtown core. And it came up as Station 17 might be a location that he's interested in putting in some modulars next to our station. We do have quite a bit of a flat area, so he's interested in basing an ambulance next to Station 17. I certainly, during the conversation, was supportive of that and would like to bring that back to you at some future point, but I intend to study it a little bit more until we can get it to a point where we can bring you something concrete to take a look at. In addition to that, we talked about a fixed-based place in Verdi, and incidentally, we've been talking about Station 351. That's our volunteer station. It really is 4 walls that house our apparatus, and we have no place for the volunteers to relax, to kick back. There's no sanitation facilities, there's no kitchen. So it's been on my radar for the last few months to look at rehabbing that building, if not even just tearing it down and doing some other new building in the future. And Dean is also interested in co-developing a new station for that to base an ambulance in Verdi. But nevertheless, that's probably a 2 or 3 year solution. But let me get into the volunteer statistics. I believe it was Commissioner Burke-Bigler that asked for an update on the volunteer census, and I've given you a summary of the number of volunteers that we currently have, as well as we classify them into operational volunteers and support volunteers. Operational volunteers are those volunteers that can be on the end of a hose line. Support volunteers do a lot of the logistical functions, which are very, very important for us to have. So we have a total of 64. We also have, right now, our reservist program is around 7, I believe, so that makes about 70 volunteers that we currently have. It has been, to be quite honest, very difficult to recruit new volunteers. We have tried a couple of times to reach out. We've had a lot of interest, but trying to get the program from interest to people who are actually doing the job is maybe 10% at best. Nevertheless, our volunteers yesterday in Verdi, they staffed Verdi during the rain event. We had 4 people at Verdi. We had 3 people at Lemon Valley. So we had South Valley stand up. So, you know, we do rely on our volunteers quite a bit, and it's a program worth continuing. I just would say that during the volunteer transition, we did have a lot of people fall away, and it was mostly because of their inability to pass physical. And it's not an easy thing to do. You have to be in reasonably good shape to be able to pass the physical. So we have to find people who are willing to commit to the training, which it's not onerous. It is some OSHA mandated training. It's some wildland training, which is maybe about 80 hours to get up and running. The big one is structural firefighting training. And structural firefighting can take as much as 260 hours. And the opportunity for a volunteer to ever get on the end of a hose line and go into a structure fire is pretty rare, because the career staff will always arrive first, almost in every case. And then there's really nothing left for the volunteers to do there other than support functions around the fire ground. So with a tremendous amount of numbers of hours and tremendous effort to get volunteers trained to a structural level is very, very difficult. There's not a lot of people that will want to commit 260 hours of training in any one year to do that and then very rarely be able to use their skills. So in our volunteer transition plan, we have said that we really need volunteers in the future are for 3 things. We need volunteers to bring us water through water tender delivery. We need them to bring air trucks so we can refill bottles. We need them to bring rehab, and then also participate on wildland incidents, which are, of course, very manpower intensive, and their operational periods go on for hours and hours. Typical structure fire might be 1 or 2 hours. A wildland incident can certainly go on for days. So that's kind of where we're at. We've knocked a lot of things off of our volunteer transition plan. I almost forgot to mention this, and I want to back up for just a moment. It was reported in the news in our volunteer recognition event of some criticism of the amount of money that was spent on that. But I'll tell you, the volunteers that came up to me and said, thank you, would you please pass on to the commissioners, thank you for holding that event. And I'm not joking. There was one guy who was absolutely in tears. He said, I've been doing this for about 20 or 30 years, and no one has ever really come up and said thank you. So on behalf of all the volunteers, and behalf of all the career firefighters that were involved in that, I wanted to pass on their comments to you to say that that had such a tremendous effect, positive effect on the department to increase the morale of our department. It was, in my opinion, money well spent. I did have a number of people say that why were the volunteers required to give their gift cards back? And I think you know that that's just simply not true. We never asked them to give the gift cards back, nor did they. So volunteers were allowed to keep their gift cards, and thanks to Commissioner Hartung for his generous donation, that remained intact. So I didn't mean to get off segue there, but I did want to mention that. So we will do another volunteer recruitment probably in the spring for wildland season, and we're going to slowly build up the number of volunteers. Ideally, I'd love to have a volunteer force of about 50 who are operational and 50 who are support. But even though we're down in numbers, the volunteers that we have are very, very dedicated. They did so much work during the flooding event that I couldn't even put a price tag on that. They responded to a number of people whose homes were taking on water. They worked very, very hard with sandbagging, and they worked side by side with career people. So our group right now, even though smaller in number, is very, very dedicated.
Chief, Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the statistics, Chief, and I don't see Wadsworth. Do we not track the volunteers in Wadsworth, or do we not have any that help Don Pelt?
We do not track volunteers in Wadsworth because the volunteers in Wadsworth are volunteers of the tribe
Okay.
and not of TM.
Okay. And then one other question, I just did a little math, just to sort of figure things out. You say it takes 260 hours to train them for structure fire.
Approximately.
So that's, at a 40-hour work week, that's like 6.5 weeks. That's a huge commitment. Do we remunerate them during that time? Is it just, do we give them anything?
We do not, no. And that training usually takes the course of 9 months to 12 months to get through
Right.
that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Burke-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, of the 8 volunteers we have in Verdi, how many live in Verdi or even close to Verdi?
Not many, Commissioner Burke-Bigler. I'm aware of only 1, maybe 2. But nevertheless, the way we use our volunteers is when we have events coming up that we can predict, like red flag warnings, like wind events, like flooding, or whenever we stand them up for any particular purpose. They do respond in, and it does take them a while to get there.
Yeah, that's a concern for me, Mr. Chair. I think volunteers are so important, but I really think it's a concern that the volunteers who are volunteering need to live somewhere near the station they're volunteering at. Because otherwise, I mean, if there's a serious need for someone to help pull hoses, cart water, do whatever, they're really useless if they're so far away.
So I am going to get into that a little bit on the next item in Verdi Fire Protection. But to answer your question directly, I attended a community meeting of Verdi citizens, and I asked a large group of people there, is there anybody here that would be willing to help volunteer? And I think about 4 people raised their hand. What I could really use Verdi people for, citizens, is to drive the water tenders and to bring
Right.
water tenders to the scene of a fire. That's going to require not as much training, but it is going to require them to pass a physical, and they'll have to have the motor vehicle endorsements to do that. But the training ramp up to get them to that point is not as much certainly as a structure fire. Because they'll never go into a burning structure, they'll never really be in, say, a hot zone. So the training requirement for them to drive a tender, and only a tender, is a little bit less.
Mr. Chair, I also like to thank the chief for the maps of the Verdi area, which are interesting and provided me with several answers to several questions that I had. So thank you very much for those.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burke-Bigler. Chief, based on, and I want to just make a brief comment here. Based on the volunteer summary that I'm looking at, and the math that Commissioner Hartung put together, we said we currently have 70, almost 70, 64 to be exact, volunteers operational currently, and a majority of those volunteers service Commissioner Herman's district in the north with Lemon Valley, Palomino Valley, Red Rock, and Silver Lake. And then a big portion, one of the larger ones would be the South Valleys, which is with 19 members. My thing is that volunteers are, a number of our paid staff started as volunteers. This is a contention I've had for a long time, and how important that they are and the training that they get during that time. And for young individuals who are looking for a career in fire or fire safety, this is a great place to start. And so I'd like to continue to see that we try to support our South Valleys and our volunteers in the north as well, because of their importance, because of their community outreach. And I know maybe in Verdi it may be different, but I know of those 19 members that are volunteers for the South Valleys all live in the South Valleys.
Right.
Yeah, and I know that probably the same, I can't speak exactly, but for probably the same for all the volunteers that live in the North Valleys districts. So when we talk about volunteers and living in the area, I think Verdi might be the anomaly. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd like to continue to see what we can do to support them, but make sure that they have a clear understanding that there is going to be an adherence to certain standards and requirements to maintain the training and maintain the equipment that we so graciously give those volunteers, because they do help out. And not only do our paid staff do a wonderful job of community outreach and development with a number of our people, but these volunteers do as well. They live in the community. These people, I know the volunteer station got called, I can't even tell you how many times during the flood event in South Valleys. I want to thank the volunteers for their time. I mean, it's a labor of love for sure, but I'd like to make sure that we continue to do what we can to do the orientations and try to adhere more volunteers, because if you look at these numbers, our last recruitment was on the 13th of October last year. We did 50 people who contacted us. Less than half attended the orientation, and then even less than less than almost a tenth. We received applications, and none out of those did we actually stand up as volunteers. I mean, either there's something going on with our orientation or our ability, or we're not getting the right people to come and participate. So, or it may be that it's a changing dynamic. People don't want to volunteer anymore. Who knows? But I know that there is a lot of talk in the South Valleys that they want to maintain the South Valleys Volunteer Fire Department, and would like to do what we can to make sure that continues to exist. So, thank you, Chief. I appreciate that report on the volunteers. So, I'll allow you to move on. Oh, yes. Commissioner Johnny Demon, see you down there.
Thank you. So, Chief, it looks like here when I'm looking at your volunteer transition plan update, that we're pivoting maybe to a new approach. You said that you've did some changes to it. And one thing I ask whoever put this together, can we make this like a dashboard with like green, yellow, red, and what the tasks are? It's much easier to just eyeball it. And I'm wondering in our recruitment, are we going to fire science classes and asking the professor to give a presentation and encourage these young people? Are we putting up, flyers at the local colleges? Are we going to job fairs? That sort of thing. I think you're going to get a much better job than just something in the newspaper or the website. These young kids don't look at that. I mean, unless you can Snapchat them the application process, I don't think that this is where they go to get their information, and we need to meet them where they're at. So I would encourage you to work with HR to have a booth at these job fairs. And while it's not a job, it's a volunteer opportunity that you look at the data could lead to a job, especially if they're young, right? And we, of course, can't say you have to be young to be a volunteer, but that is that target audience. So I think we need to pivot and change the whole process, because it's a different generation and they have a different sense of volunteerism. And I'm sure, like anybody, when they were 18, 19, 20, 21, their number one question is, what's in it for me? Which is fine. You can talk about the graduations and the gift cards that Commissioner Hartung will be giving in perpetuity. And I mean, there's just a different way to get these young people, and I really encourage you with that pivot to change it, because and one of the troubles that we've had with volunteers in the past is they were never professionalized. Right. And they couldn't even pass physicals, for goodness sake, and refused to even do the physicals, but still would come on scene with our professional firefighters and frankly put a lot of people in danger. So I think we need to really change and consider this audience, maybe work with Leuenhagen's staff, because they know how to do the messaging and how to get to that target audience. So that's what I'm seeing you saying here. We're doing a pivot. It's not working the traditional way, which volunteering is not working in the traditional way, because the people we want to volunteer are the next generation. We can't do it forever, right? And they have a different lifestyle and aim and goal, but I think if we could entice them by going to classes, and it doesn't have to be just fire science, it could be to EMT classes up at TMCC, people that kind of fit that model and probably are already looking to be firefighters. And as you well know, coming up through the ranks, it's one of the best things you can have on besides the fire science degree, or, it's one of the best things you can have is that you've actually been in service, even as a volunteer. So that would be my suggestion to help with that.
Thanks, Commissioner Jung. We just attended the North Valley High School Career Fair. And
Good.
had a couple of firefighters there. We had about 12 people who were interested.
Yeah.
We do have
Yeah, I
regular...
was going to say, and send firefighters. Don't send me, don't send you. Send them turned out, talking about it, young, sorry, older fire, like young men and women to get the, that they know that they'd be accepted and that'd be a cool job to have, not some old gal like me going in and saying, yeah, you guys should sign up. I mean, I don't think I'm that compelling, but thank you. Clearly, I was at the first volunteer recruitment thing. Gave a good old spiel.
Well, we absolutely do need to...
Strong numbers right there.
We do need to re-strategize our
Okay.
recruitment effort, absolutely.
I know you know, I just want to put it on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, Commissioner Jung. I have a green Subaru. It's been well kept for sale in order to, has a few bumper stickers on the back, but they'll come off fairly easily. Sorry, Commissioner Jung. One of the things that we might want to think about doing, no different than we do with our planning commission, we give them a small stipend when they show up. So maybe when they go through the training and complete the training, we have a small stipend for them, and then we give them a stipend when they show up to additional trainings. And it's not anything that's major, but it's a stipend. If we can see our way through the planning commission and the board of adjustment to do that, perhaps we can find a few bucks, because it doesn't have to be a lot to just acknowledge that they're there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might just conclude with, even though our numbers are down, our census is down, our productivity with respect to volunteers is way up. So we had a lot of people on the roster, but you never saw them, and they never came to training, and they never responded. So we had this big roster of volunteers, which I think was a bit of a paper tiger, so we distilled that down to the people that really wanted to do this. Now the next step is to build that back up with people who really want to do this for the right reasons, and so I'm very, very hopeful. In fact, when I said when we did the volunteer transition plan, this was going to be at least a 2-year effort to get us back up to where we would have a program that ran well. So I'm very excited about trying to recruit again for volunteers, and we'll be doing that very shortly.
Chief, and I would second what Commissioner Hartung said. I would look for in the budget if we have some monies available to look into offering stipends of some sort to volunteers of some sort of value, because we know time is money, and these people are offering their time to serve us and serve our constituents. There are tax dollars that are going to our obviously. Those are very few tax dollars, but there are tax dollars that are available. I'd like to look at budget to make sure we see if we have that available. All right, moving on.
Finally, moving on to succession planning. Admittedly, we've lost a little momentum in this topic because of the reorganization of my management staff, but we're looking at getting a deputy chief and division chief of EMS and training on board very soon. We have Dina Wiggins now, who's doing our HR administration. A very smart lady who's going to help us kind of take the reins of succession planning. One of the things that staff, through our strategic plan process, identified is where we really need to focus is at the captain level. So we've been talking about doing a captain's academy. So we've been promoting people up over the last few years, but we haven't given our captains a lot of support with respect to the skills that they need, particularly supervision and command level experience. And getting them to be good captains, because once they're good captains, then they're going to be good battalion chiefs and eventually good fire chiefs later on down the road. So later this summer, we're planning a captain's academy to try to do that, and I expect my management staff vacancies to be filled by May. So we should be at full speed ahead by, I'd say, June, July. I've given you an organizational chart to show you what the proposed structure of the department will look like in 2017.
Chief, I have a couple questions on that. So we are going out, the deputy chief position, we are going out and putting that out for, that position is open currently. Are we recruiting? Are we not recruiting?
It's been recruited since January 1st. It closed on January 31st. I understand that there were 37 applications for deputy chief and something like 21 for division chief of EMS.
Okay.
We hired ESCI to do the distillation and review of the applicants to tell us who's qualified and who's not qualified against the job specification. Don Bivens of ESCI has told me that he's very, very pleased with the quality of candidates. So I think we have something like, what he told me, 12 or 16 good candidates for deputy chief, probably a good 10 for division chief of EMS. So those, we expect that pool number to be semifinalists. And then once we interview them, we'll have a finalist pool and then make the selection from the finalist pool.
Okay.
I expect that to be complete by end of April.
And then, okay, so complete by the end of April, and that's also the same for the EMS chief as well?
Correct.
Okay. And then the fire office, we have frozen the fire officer for strategic and volunteers. We're going to keep that frozen, and that's going to fall under the new EMS chief, correct?
Yes.
And then with this, in regards to the EMS chief and the deputy chief, on those final interviews, are we going to have any individuals from the local 3895 participate in those interviews, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's critical to have their input.
So they will be interviewed with a panel?
We haven't designed the assessment center yet, but there will be, I'm anticipating panel interviews. I'm anticipating a couple of scenarios, real-life scenarios, perhaps an inbox exercise. Yes, we'll absolutely have labor there, as well as whatever staff members want to participate in, even if members of the commission want to sit in. You're welcome.
A second, Mr. Manager, Mr.
Sure. Commissioner John, somebody.
Whoever will listen to me. You don't want commissioners on a hiring committee or giving input. That's totally breaching what we're supposed to do. We're way up here policy. You're the weeds, operations, and you will have a cluster if you even get one person involved, let alone two of us. So I would strongly recommend we stay out of that business. We don't know what we're evaluating anyways. Not a single one of us are professional or past retired firefighters. So I would strongly suggest
Holiday Inn Express last night.
on this smartass. But I get what the chairman is saying, and that is that 3895 needs to have somebody on the panel that is a voting member that you trust, right? That's not going to get their homeboy or homegirl in there and get payback, but that can be rational and analytical and pick who's best for the job, not who their best buddy is. So,
Correct.
sorry. Thank you.
Commissioner John.
But I did want to extend the invitation at least.
I can't even get on to it. All right, Chief, any other discussions on this item at this time? All right, Chief, the Verdi.
All right, on to Verdi Fire Protection. If I could refer you to map number 2 in your packet. And one of the questions that came up from the fire on August 2nd in Verdi was the location of the station, where we moved it from Boomtown and moved it more towards Mogul. The board may recall that in March of 2012, when the board was in discussions with the city of Reno about continuing the contract or discontinuing the contract, I believe by that time, in March, the board had resolved that it was going to move forward with TM as a standalone department. In March of 2012, the city of Reno canceled mutual aid agreements with Sierra Fire and Truckee Meadows Fire, and so we were left then with having to protect the area that you see in Collin Ranch that's in TM on the right side of map 2, as well as protecting the area in Verdi, which you see on the left. So the challenge for us was to find a fire station location that was going to balance the response time between both of those communities. Thing two, that station was absolutely dilapidated. It was mouse infested, and it had to be rebuilt anyway.
Mouse infested?
What did I say? Mouse infested. It was in bad shape.
Ugh.
And two, we had no ownership interest in the land that it sat on. We didn't own it, and there was some sort of a lease agreement that nobody could find on paper. So it was imperative that we move Station 35 to an area that could serve both communities. We found a 5-acre parcel in Mogul, and the station was built. So the response time from Station 35 to the fire that we had was approximately, and I'm speaking factually, this is all from the CAD notes, was about 6 minutes and some seconds. Adding on to the call processing time from the 911 caller to when the tones were pushed out makes it about 8 minutes and a few seconds to when the 911 phone rang, it was answered, and we arrived on scene. So it was somewhere around 8 minutes and a few seconds on our arrival. So the issue has really come up, and you've heard me say numerous times that there's 4 things that we need to be able to put out a fire. And I'm going to say them again because you're probably not tired enough of me saying them, but we need human resources, we need firefighters, we need tools and equipment, we need fire hose, fire trucks, we need access. If you can't get to the fire, you can't put it out. And most importantly, we need water. For firefighters not to have water is like going to war without ammunition. And if we don't have a lot of water, we absolutely can't do much. And in the case of this particular fire, we were only able to bring 750 gallons of water on the fire truck, as well as 3,000 gallons of tanker water that came from Station 351. So I want to show a graphic, and if I could have the overhead come up. Thanks for getting my bald head in that picture. Pan down just a little bit more and increase the size if that's possible.
I don't know if you can, I don't think we can pan
Is that
on
going to be
camera.
about as good as we can get? All right. So this is the home that caught fire on that day. The initial 911 caller said that the house was substantially involved in fire. The initial size-up reports said that estimated conservatively that the fire was about 50% involved in the tire square footage, which is about 4,000 square feet. So the problem that we have in rural applications is that, one, we don't have necessarily abundant water, and the technology that we have is to bring water on the fire truck and in water tenders. That's what we do everywhere in TM where we don't have hydrants. And in fact, 25% of the structures that we protect in our district are not served by a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet. So this was no different. So the issue in this particular fire was, one, this was a red flag day. The temperature was 97 degrees. We found substantial fire on arrival, and then we have something called exposures. So we have areas to the top left, and we have the ancillary structure to the bottom right that we call exposures, and those had to be protected. So with roughly 4,000 gallons of water, it took us an extraordinary amount of time to bring more water tenders in and also establish a water supply from the canal that was about a half a mile away. All of those things took time, and when you have to have more time, obviously the fire continues to burn, and we can't necessarily extinguish it. So the choice that the incident commander had to make in this particular fire is how much water do you use on the structure that's on fire, and how much do you conserve to keep the structures on the left and the right and the fire from the wildlands of going and taking out the entire neighborhood. And unfortunately, and I believe was a correct decision, that the incident commander had to make a choice to be defensive in this particular operation, which means that not a lot of water is going to go on the home that's on fire, that we had to conserve some of that water to protect the surrounding neighborhood. So where we move forward with respect to fire protection in Verdi, and I know there's a number of people here that want to comment and have commented, is how do we develop then more water resources wherever we have rural areas, and we have a lot of rural areas. We're largely 25%, again, is a rural operation. The expectation in service levels between rural and suburban and urban are going to have to be different, Because in urban service levels such as downtown Sparks or downtown Reno, you have a concentration of fire hydrants, you have a concentration of fire trucks and fire resources. And certainly you can bring more resources to bear faster and have abundant water to be able to apply on a fire. That's not the case in Verdi. And it's been the case, unfortunately, Verdi has been there for decades. And so if we could go back to the map, then that was map number 2, just briefly.
Chief, before you move on, is that home, is that particular structure served by municipal water source, or is it on a well?
There's no municipal water for fire protection, no. And I would assume that the home is served by a well for domestic purposes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So we did an analysis of how many homes in Verdi have hydrants that are close. And let me just see if I can find this really close. So it's roughly 50-50. We drew loosely a line around what Verdi is, but you can see, based on this map, that the dark areas with the gold stripes are City of Reno, and the areas that's light gray with the white roads are still TM. So sooner or later, it would seem that Reno's march to annex would probably include a lot of Verdi at some point in the future. So development of a municipal water supply, I would think, would eventually come when in section 2001 and where you see 2002, when those areas develop, you can finally bring municipal water infrastructure close enough to the homes that don't currently have it and probably solve that finally. The problem is bringing in a water supply is going to be, a municipal water supply is going to be about $1 million a mile. It's very, very expensive to trench. And from what I understand, Tumwa is somewhere around 5 miles away. So that seems to be an extraordinary amount of water to want to spend for anybody to bring water in. So what are our alternatives? So staff has done a study, which, Madam Clerk, has this been handed out yet? No, it's coming to you. So staff has prepared a rural water supply study to give the board some options about what we can consider to improve water for Verdi and actually for all communities going forward.
Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you. Chief, is there any way that, and this is going to be sort of left field, is there any way for us to hook up to a municipal well, or a municipal well, a domestic well rather?
Not really.
You know, so that we can fight fires in these individual homes? In other words,
A well won't
if we-
produce the required gallonage because if you look at the fire code and even ISO says that we would need 2,000 gallons of water per minute.
And I recognize that, but even if we recommended that they had some type of a fitting at their well, so that even a 1-inch line or a small 2-inch line, even though it's not as productive as would be required by code, at least it would be some source of water.
I think it would not produce enough water,
I see.
is my feeling. So what this study does is it gives some options with respect to developing more water in Verdi and everywhere else within TM. Now, there are some policy considerations for you because obviously there's going to be some expense. Later on in the agenda, you see a recommendation for additional water tenders. One of the struggles we've had in Verdi is that the Verdi Volunteers Association insisted on having the water tender that's currently there in place, even though, excuse me, we wanted to put in a water tender that was a little easier to drive. The current water tender is a double clutch 18-speed, which I think there's only 3 people in the department that are qualified to drive it. And when I wanted to replace it, of course the answer was no. So, but now that we've gone through the volunteer transition, and now I'm able to make all of these decisions, not only for volunteer and for career stations, we're going to immediately, if you approve the agenda item later on down in the agenda, we're going to take delivery of a water tender and replace it by the end of the month. And that may not be where it stops. I want to add more water tenders, one to South Valley, probably two. If we can find people within Verdi that will train on water tenders, we can have two at the volunteer station and one at the career station. So we would be bringing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 gallons, 8,000 gallons of water on the initial response. So when you look at this fire, again, 2,000 gallons a minute is what the fire code says that we need to protect structures and also put water on the fire building. That's only going to last a very short amount of time. So where do we go for more resources? I think the next best option would be a community cistern. And what that is just simply an underground tank that would hold somewhere around 30, 40, 50,000 gallons of water that we could pre-fill. The problem with that is when you look in Verdi, again, we were challenged with the sustainable water supply was a half a mile away. We laid a half a mile of hose from the canal to the building in order to have enough water to be able to put this fire in. So we can do something called a hose wagon. We can put a mile of hose on a truck and flake it out if we need to. Again, all of that takes time. So this is going to take a little bit more study on first blush. I think it's going to be a series of community cisterns throughout Verdi. The question is going to be, is it TM funded? Is it citizen funded, or is it a combination thereof, or can we go out and get grants to build these? So no idea really on what the cost of a cistern might be. I might hazard a guess to say if it's 25 or 30,000 gallons, it might be in the range of about $150,000 to $200,000 per each, which isn't extraordinarily expensive. But if you add more technology to it, like a fire pump, you know, the price could certainly come up.
Commissioner Bergweber.
Chief, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, a couple of questions. We have floater, we have firefighters who are floaters that go from different stations. I think we have 3, don't we?
Currently, but not for long, but
Okay, so you're already planning. I was wondering if we couldn't designate them or some of them into Station 35, along with an extra water tender, which would be, I mean, is that something that we could think about?
That is an option, yes.
So then, hang on a minute. So then my other question is, where's the closest Reno fire station to Verdi?
You see it at Station 11, which as the crow flies, it's pretty close, but for it to get onto the interstate, it's a little bit harder to get on the interstate. And then station number 19, if you can see that towards the top, that's, from my understanding, that's staffed with a rescue, so it has no firefighting capability. So then the next closest to 11 would be Station 10, which is
Not on our map.
not on there. So
Yeah.
it shows you how far away it is.
So, and Station 11 is going to have, getting on the freeway is going to be difficult.
It's a little more circuitous than it is for 35, because 35 gets on the interstate
Right on it.
very quickly.
So, and also the other question I had is, where in the Verdi area was this house that burned located on this map? Can you show?
Not too far from where you see 351 designated, so if you went just a little bit north of that, about a half a mile north of 351.
Okay,
All right.
all right, thank you.
Commissioner Herman?
Am I on? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. I'm concerned about right now, the cisterns that take money and time. As a temporary thing, couldn't we make use of some offers that I've had from contractors that have their big water trucks, that they would be willing to park a truck or two or whatever for additional water? I know that I've talked to Mark Forey from Tumwa, and it's looking like some of the development will be happening up there before too long. And if that happens in 2 years, say, then we just have that 2-year period rather than investing in cisterns, and more water tenders wouldn't be a bad idea. So just a suggestion.
Thank you, Commissioner Herman. Commissioner Jung.
Kind of along those same lines, Chief Moore, I'm wondering if for a temporary solution that might turn into a permanent plan for these areas that you've identified that are without fire hydrant access, if we could put a fourth person in that firehouse that would completely be dedicated to driving the water trucks and have the water trucks sited there, ready to go. A fourth person could be getting the water there while the other three are fighting the fire. Have you thought of that?
We've had that discussion at the staff level. We weighed that against putting another engine or a rescue in service at Station 15 in Sun Valley, where we have the most number of
Medical.
structure fires.
Right,
So,
right.
what we intend to do is once we get our software purchased, we can predict and do a data
Absolutely.
analysis to show you the pros and cons of both solutions. This certainly is an option, and
Okay.
yes, staff has discussed it at length.
Okay. And just to follow up, I think that, and it's no fault of this commission or even this planning staff, but let this be a cautionary tale to us when it comes to planning and development. If we don't require fire hydrants and egress and ingress of water planning vis-a-vis Lemon Valley, Verdi, both Washoe County developments, unincorporated county developments, this is what we will see for the rest of our future. And we should learn from this. We shouldn't have propane tanks. We should not have the sewage leach fields, which I can't even believe people live like that. That's not good development. I'm sorry. I'm sure a bunch of you live like that. I'm sorry, but I don't want that in my yard. Yeah, septic tank with the leach fields and, ugh. So I think that the cautionary tale is don't ever approve this again, Washoe County, and we need to go over this with a fine-tooth comb. And I really don't believe the county should be in the business of residential development. We gain nothing, we get annexed, we lose the tax base, and then those poor annexed people have to then pay lots of infrastructure money to bring them up to the city code. And I have zero interest in doing any more development of this type of density in the unincorporated county.
Commissioner Jung, I might add that numerous times we have been successful in extinguishing structure
I'm not
fires.
saying that you're not, but it's still a
Yeah.
hindrance when you don't have fire hydrants and you have to run a hose for half a mile. I mean, come on. That sounds like 1920s to me.
But the technology is that we respond with an engine and a water tender, and we've been very successful in structure fires that didn't have hydrants.
Sure.
This was an example of where the fire had progressed significantly and was radiating so much heat. I mean, simply physics, an exercise in physics, because a gallon of water will only remove so many BTUs. I mean, on the initial 911, ammunition was exploding in the garage. The reporting party on 911 said that there are flames coming out of every window, which, we know it was about 50% involved. That was a significant amount of fire. What I'm saying is that the amount of water that we had available, even if we would have had more water tenders, in this particular fire would have been very, very difficult. So as we're talking about solutions, I know the board has talked about fire sprinklers, residential fire sprinklers, but I am convinced that a home equipped with residential fire sprinklers would not necessarily see a loss this big.
Mr. Chair.
Thing two would be municipal water. That's the next best solution. And then when you don't have that, then it's water tenders and cisterns. So it kind of goes in that order.
I got you. Yeah, to require everybody to have fire sprinklers, I think is onerous. It's very expensive to put that into a home that's already been built. Now, if we wanted to get big government on unincorporated county, we could say every home that comes in, you have to have if you're in this area, you must have fire sprinklers in your home. Pre-construction, that must be part of the plan. But I can't look at people that have lived in their home all these years, and I'm sure they're afraid of fire like the rest of us, but to put that kind of investment in a home that's already built, I mean, it's not fair.
Yeah,
And
you're right, it is very, very expensive.
It's too much, yeah.
Particularly when the ceilings architecturally are complex.
you got it, and the roof, and I mean, my husband would say no, if you told us to do it. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Jung. Commissioner McGurk-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, do we know what caused the fire? This was a red flag day, right? So the wind was blowing?
A fire marshal was not available. Our fire marshal was not available. We asked the Sparks fire marshal to come over and investigate, and his conclusion was fire started from oily rags left on the deck. It was 97 degrees with a little bit of wind, and it was his conclusion that the rags ignited. The deck was apparently had a fresh coat of linseed oil, which added to the acceleration of the fire. So that was the cause,
Okay, thank you.
as we determined.
All right. All right, seeing no more discussion on this time. Chief, on one just in closing, I would urge that you would place a fourth member in Station 35 and make sure that we have a stand-ready tender available for any future events for the temporary fix until we can find some sort of a permanent solution. So that would be my recommendation at this time. But seeing no other discussion, and I know we have individuals here for public comment signed in, I'd like to take public comment on item 8A at this time.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we have Jim Severs, followed by Frank Gauthier, and then Gary Cushman.
Good morning, Mr. Severs.
Good morning. I'm Jim Severs. I live in Verdi, as you might imagine. And I just want to say right off the bat that I'm really happy to hear that some of the concerns that have been voiced in the past seem to have been acted upon. So right off the bat, we're off to a good start, I think. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. I've got several things I want to talk about. One is basically the mutual aid issue. And the fire in Lakeview actually pointed out that this issue is back in the forefront again, mutual aid. And I know a lot of this stuff's already been talked about, so sorry for that, but we didn't know that. There is no guideline, apparently, that mutual aid shouldn't be called and only be called on a severe emergency. So why wasn't it called? We kind of had a fire that was up. We were in a red flag day. It could have been a lot worse. We didn't have that much wind, which was unbelievable. But that actually was something we think that should have happened. We think multiple companies should have been dispatched to the fire, and that would have possibly solved some other issues. One of the issues is, of course, if you have to go into a fire, OSHA requires that you have a 2-in, 2-out rule, and with one company, that's just not possible. You know, if somebody was in the house.
Mr. Severs, I ask you just to address the board, please.
What's what?
Just continue to address the board, please. As a whole. Address the board.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Thank you.
So generally, a single company can't really do that. Volunteers, this is another issue. There were 25 volunteers signed up in Verdi at one time. And with the changes and reassignments and reductions, most of them have moved away. Now there's only 6 names on the board in the Verdi 351 fire station, 6. And the funny thing is, there's only 1 volunteer out of that 6 who can drive that water tender. And the next funny thing is, he works in Gerlach. So kind of out of the picture altogether. And I think we do need to either staff Station 351 with someone or Station 35 with someone who can actually drive that truck, unless there's some other reason, there's somebody else that can do it. Right now, Station 351 is only expensive storage for some pretty expensive equipment. Insurance rates. Our closest station now, as you know, is Mogul, 5 miles away, or more than 5 miles away from most houses in Verdi. This makes people a little bit nervous because of the August fire we had, that we're not going to be able to save our houses, and the insurance rates now are going up in Verdi. So that's something else to consider. We don't really believe we have to pay twice for fire protection. Okay. Verdi, we think also that station, either 351 needs to be staffed or Station 35 needs to be staffed somehow with professional firefighters to come aid a fire in Verdi. The last issue is water, and we spent a lot of time on this, and I think the chief made the comment that I'm going to make. The Lakeview fire exposed the fact that you have to bring water to a firefight in Verdi. You have to. And fire crews are not really aware of water sources in Verdi and where you can draft water and get water. I was there physically, and it was a little bit interesting watching what was happening.
Thank you, Mr. Severs.
That's it.
I'm sorry, your time is up for today. I apologize. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Next up, we have Frank Gauthier, followed by Gary Cushman, and then Roger Puccinelli.
Commissioners, my name is Frank Gauthier. I've been a resident of Verdi for 15-plus years. I'm reading a letter here that was written by Addie Argyris. She is a resident of Verdi, but she's working today, so. Her letter is 1/5 of my property taxes for Truckee Meadows fire protection. In Verdi, I pay double for paramedic services. Station 35 is frequently out of district, leaving the area uncovered for services my taxes pay for. On August 2nd, 2016, Verdi neighbors watch a house burn. The response from Truckee Meadows Fire was delayed, inadequate, and unprepared when it arrived on scene. The first engine in had no clue where the water was. It was not equipped with the proper adapters needed to access the supply when located. The fire exposed a complete lack of pre-planning for the area on Truckee Meadows' part. Chief Charles Moore, in an email dated September 16th, 2016, laid out his suggestions to address the questions and concerns raised by the residents that watched their neighbor's home burn. A few of the suggestions were putting in a permanent dry hydrant at the Verdi Canal on Bridge Street, equipping the engines with proper adapters for the dry hydrant, replacing the volunteers' tender with a new one. These suggestions show a lack of thought and planning and training for department, providing fire protection in an area that relies on water from a supply other than hydrants. Had a proper pre-plan been done for the area, Chief Moore would have realized the dry hydrant was already in place and had been for 7 or 8 years. Training by the Fire Protection District would have revealed the lack of proper adapters on the trucks. There are no volunteers who live or work in Verdi area, resulting in a delayed response for local water tenders. At a community meeting in Verdi on November the 22nd, 2016, Chief Moore told those present to cut their trees and have a good evacuation plan, seemingly implying our houses were going to burn down if they caught fire. These comments from Chief Moore are perceived to be flippant and are totally unacceptable. There are actions that can be taken to greatly improve fire protection in Verdi. More talk and promises are not the way forward. The mistakes made on August the 2nd, 2016 that cost residents their home could have been avoided if proper attention had been paid to the area's needs.
Thank you, sir.
Gary Cushman, followed by Roger Puccinelli, and then Rich Laverty.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Cushman.
I live in Verdi, 265 Prickly Pear. I'd like to speak a little bit back on the volunteers. I've been in Verdi for 7 years, and we had a call for we had a gas leak at our house. And the first on scene were the volunteers. We called Nevada Energy, and Nevada Energy came up, or they said evacuate the house, and then while I was on the phone, I heard the siren. I told my wife, I said, I'm not positive, but I think there's a siren coming. Turned out our volunteer fire department came up, got my dog, my wife, and myself out. Without that assistance, I'll slow this down. The Truckee Meadow was there about 5 to 7 minutes later, followed by NV Energy about 15 minutes later. In the meantime, they had secured our whole place because we had a leak at the meter, and they took care, NV took care of all that. But the volunteers were the first on scene, and like some people have spoken before, I really strongly think that it's the eyes on the ground. They got radios, they got telephones. They can be talking to the arriving fire department and giving them an update of what's going on, and maybe this is bigger than it really should be. We did have lack of water. I think there was more lack of coordination from management not knowing where water was, because there was a swimming pool right next door. So I'm not going to take the rest of the time. I'm sure other people will have it, but I really would like, last thing is check your website. It says volunteer, but it's under construction, and it puts you to Maureen, I think. I sent an email asking for an application because we have a number of young kids in the age range that you guys think it should be. I didn't get an application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next up is Roger Puccinelli, followed by Rich Laverty, and then Pam McNeil.
Good morning, Board. I prepared things to say, but most of them have been covered already. I would like to say that was my home that burned, and the water that they finally got an hour and 18 minutes after the call was put in came from the dry stand, which, as Chief Moore said, was a half a mile away. The Truckee River is just feet below my house. If you look at the plans, that's the same water they took out of the canal. It goes into the canal, through the power station, and back into the Truckee River. So that water was available, along with the water at the swimming pool next door. I think that when I asked, it took me 25, 30 minutes to get home after the call was put in, and my wife called me. I was out in the back end of Red Rock. When I got to it, I take exception with how much the house was on fire. The deck was on fire and the garage was on fire. The right side of the home was not on fire. And I approached the firemen and asked them why they weren't putting water on the fire. They said they didn't have water. And I said, there's a river just feet below. And they said they didn't have a pump. I think the necessary equipment needed in that area, since the Truckee River runs through Verdi, would be necessary from this time on. It's pretty devastating to sit there for an hour and 18 minutes and watch your... Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puccinelli.
Rich Laverty, followed by Pam McNeil, and then Carly Borchardt.
Good morning. My name is Rich Laverty. I have lived at 435 Lakeview Drive for the past 11 years. I am an architect and general building contractor in California, Nevada, and my office, Tahoe City. Most important, though, I speak to you today as a 5-term elected member of the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. On August 2nd, the Puccinelli fire occurred exactly 1 lot and 1 home west of my home. I have attended many meetings with my fellow residents, and most important, the community meetings conducted by Chief Moore and his associates. The attendees listened to all the excuses and rhetoric from the chief and countered by offering all sorts of future solutions. I emphasize future as none seem to be viable without funding, land acquisition, additional employees, equipment, and approvals from other various agencies, and on it goes. Frustrated, I finally addressed Chief Moore by stating that all these offered solutions were not solving the present situation, i.e., what if another fire should happen in a residential area? The community needs a documented plan outlining response time, equipment, manpower to be dispatched, immediate requests for mutual aid, identified water sources. In fact, next to the Puccinelli home, there's a 40,000-gallon swimming pool that nobody recognized. I'm 2 doors down, I got another 40,000 gallons. I am requesting the commission to direct Chief Moore to produce a documented plan outlining a course of action for immediate implementation. In closing, I need to remind all of you that for that one day that we did not have the strong afternoon, early evening winds that have been occurring every day for the past 2 months, besides losing the Puccinelli residents, we would have lost our neighborhood and most of Verdi. We would have had a wildland fire running through Verdi. I'm sure everyone read the Reno Gazette Journal on Sunday, and we do not need another Little Valley fire. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Pam McNeil, followed by Carly Borchardt.
Good morning. My name is Pam McNeil. I am not a Verdi resident. I live in Somerset at the very northwest adjacent to. I am a member of the Ward 5 NAB, and in my previous life, outside of Reno, lived in a community that was county, right adjacent to city, and I think it's important to have the support and recognize the needs of each. As the gentleman just said, a wildland fire is also something to be considered. A community volunteer is very important. Well, there's advantages to both, older as well as the younger. The elders have the experience, the maturity, the knowledge of the area. While I recognize the extensive training, something to consider too, I went through a Citizens Patrol where I used to live, and we had training. It wasn't 216 hours. While that is perfect, I think there's a lot of situations that can be handled by less than perfect. My new favorite saying is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think right now we need something good, something that can get out there and work and do something now. I experienced in my previous life the Grand Prix fire. In 2003, it went through Southern California all the way up. People in our area nobody knew where to go. Nobody knew where the streets were, which I think is a lot of what happens in Verdi. People that know the area, know what's there, they can help, even though they haven't put in 216 hours of training. Commissioner Lucy, I appreciate your comments on Verdi. I mean, just something is necessary now, and I think that having a stipend is a great idea. I like the idea of having 4 people at that station, even if it's only on red flag days. I mean, it needs to be recognized. As far as annexation, the annexation that's been done by Reno was done 15-plus years ago. I don't know that there's anything planned for the immediate future, but I think we need to protect the county area that is Verdi now. And I think that's about all I wanted to say. I like everything that everyone said, and I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Carly Borchardt.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks so much for taking the time this morning. This was a really important matter, and we're really appreciative that it's been addressed. I, too, am more than pleased at what I've heard today. What I would like to do is let you guys know there's a lot of different residents, as has been mentioned. A lot of different meetings have happened. The community is very involved and invested in this, and we're very looking forward to following through and making sure that this gets handled and addressed as you guys are discussing. We did circulate a petition, and I feel it's only fair that I turn this into you guys. There's several hundred signatures on this petition of residents that are invested and involved in this. So we'll look forward to following through with you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
If you could give that to the clerk, that'd be great. Thank you.
There's no more public comment.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Chief. We are on to item 8B, career statistics, please. Do you have anything to add to the career statistics or volunteer statistics at this time?
I do not, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Are there any questions by the commission? All right, looking for a motion to accept item 8A, B, and C. I have a motion by Commissioner Hartung, second by Commissioner Jung. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Chief, we are running extremely late, folks. We're going to try to move through this as quickly as possible, this next few. So item 9, please, Chief.
Item number 9 is discussion and possible approval, acceptance, and ratification of a community wildfire protection plan developed by the Arrow Creek Homeowners Association. To be very brief on my comments, these plans are critical for a community to develop protections against fast-moving wildfires. I applaud Arrow Creek. Alan Law, Kathy DeLegal, and Janet Oren are here if you want to hear from them. Otherwise, what this plan does is it outlines a strategy for Arrow Creek to increase its safety through wildfire mitigation, such that if a fire ever does move through, it burns around the homes and not through them. It allows them to have some grant opportunities through NDF and other sources. So I applaud the Arrow Creek community and would urge the board to ratify the plan.
Mr. Chair, I would just say that this is a great plan. I took the time to really dig through it, and I don't know who all at Arrow Creek worked on it, but you guys did a superb job. And I think this is something we could actually apply in other areas.
Yes, I think so.
And so I would support approval, accept and ratify the Community Wildfire Protection Plan as developed by the Arrow Creek homeowners.
I have a motion by Commissioner Burkbigler, second by Commissioner Jung. Just for further.
Public comment.
I'm sorry, public comment.
We have Kathy Delegal. Delegal?
Kathy, you want to go ahead? All right. She's going to wave her right really quick. Okay, come on up, Kathy. Love to hear from you. And as Kathy's coming up, I would like just a really quick comment. Kathy and Janet were the brains behind this fuels management plan, and I really want to thank them for all the work that they did up to this. So thank you. So Kathy, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Chairman Lucy and other commissioners, appreciate the time and opportunity to say thank you for approving and ratifying our plan. We've worked on it for a number of years, and we are going to be turning in your approvals to NDF, which is great. And just to let you know, we're very excited, and hopefully you could use this as a model also. We're applying for a grant this year through NDF, and the grant is a combination of the Arrow Creek HOA and the Friends of Arrow Creek, which own the golf courses, and the county. So all three entities are applying for this grant together, and we're going to target, if we get the grant, 178 acres. So it's a huge opportunity, and it's a collaborative opportunity, and it shows different entities can work together. And we'd be happy to share information on how long that took to get it going. So, but it can be done. It proves it can be done. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Kathy. Commissioner John.
Yeah, Ms. Delegal, and Ms. Oren, I commend you for doing the heavy lifting to take care of this, and I think you might have some contracting abilities with some other areas to help them figure out how to navigate this as well. That's a serious suggestion, because the Verdi Bucket Brigade could probably use a lot of help and assistance in assembling this in a much quicker fashion, as you found how much longer it takes. I encourage you two to talk. Thank you.
And just one additional comment with Mrs. Delegal, and has a number of years of experience in grant writing. She comes from a government background in California and a local government, not just a government, but a local government background in the state of California. And so she has the experience. Mrs. Oren has, they both have a phenomenal understanding of fuels management, and it shows tremendously within their report that they provided. So I'm excited that we'll be able to execute this and move forward. So without any further discussion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Chief, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do, if this is okay with everybody, if we could take item 10 and 11 both in a block vote really quickly. Is that okay with the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, item 11 needs to be pulled, so you'll just be acting on 10.
Oh, so item 11 will be pulled. Okay. So we're pulling item 11 from the agenda for today. So item 10. We've got a motion. Motion from Commissioner Jung. Do I have a second? I have a second from Commissioner Hartung. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed. Motion carries unanimously.
Public comment?
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry.
could we have public comment?
Yes, we can have public comment. Do we have public comment
There
signed
is
in?
no public comment on that
Thank you very
item.
much. I always like to not call. See, I already knew there was no public comment, Mr. Watson. It's my sixth sense that's working for me today.
I knew it as well, that's why I piped up. Figured it
Chief,
would prime you.
Chief, is there any need for a closed session today? Item 12.
There is not.
All right, seeing none. For 13, final chiefs and fire commissioners and fire chiefs announcements. Are there any commissioners that have anything to add? Chief?
None.
All right, final public comment. Do we have a final public comment sign in, please?
There is no public comment.
We have no public comment sign in. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.